I run into a lot of people who tell me if they set up an LLC, they have asset protection. Well, nothing can be further from the truth. And let me start off by sharing with you a story. You see, this individual, we're going to call him Mark. Mark here had heard the same thing, that if he sets up an LLC, he's protected. And so he set up a limited liability company. And inside of that LLC, he put 4 properties, all in the same LLC. Now, Mark owned all these rentals in that LLC that he created, and he was keeping things pretty straight. So he kept, his personal assets out here. He wasn't commingling assets. He was keeping all the rents coming into this LLC like he was told to do to maintain its structure so no one could pierce the veil. So he thought, hey, as long as I do it right, if something happens in the LLC, it stays in the LLC. So what happened is that one Saturday he decided to drive out to one of his properties because he heard that the railing on a raised deck was a bit loose. And now he'd done this 100 times. He's fixed it many times. He just had to tighten down some bolts on it. While he was doing that, he did notice that several of them had stripped out. And so he took off. Of course, he went home. Several weeks later, what he realized is that he didn't do it right because it wasn't tight enough. And actually, the tenant's mother-in-law leaned on that railing and it gave way, and she fell 12 feet onto a concrete patio and broke her hip in several places. Now, Mark thought, hey, I have protection here because I put together a limited liability company. The property was in the name of the LLC. And he'd been told by other investors, right, or guys that he met up at a real estate meetup or CP that he's working with, that, hey, as long as you have the LLC, you're protected from that exact kind of lawsuit. Now, let me tell you, if you've been hearing that, it's completely wrong. And here's the thing. Mark's not unusual. My father was the exact same type of investor, right? That he would go out and work on his properties. In fact, I read a comment on Reddit just last week, someone saying, and I'm going to paraphrase here, an LLC protects you from personal liability no matter what. Meaning if something goes wrong on the property, all of my assets are safe. You see, there are thousands of investors, just like my father, the way he used to do it, that read comments like that and they make a mistake. That's why I'm going to show you what Mark did wrong here and break it down for you and show you how you should not be making this mistake going forwards. And it's really easy to do this and set it up and make these mistakes going along and blow your complete asset protection plan. All right, so what does an LLC actually do for you? So when you set up a limited liability company, I want you to understand this, what it does and does not do. It is a separate legal entity. So if you're down here and you've created your limited liability company, generally speaking, what happens in the box, as I stated earlier, stays in the box, okay? And that's really important. So if I have a piece of property right here and that property were to burn down and somebody is injured through smoke inhalation, then as long as I didn't start the fire, right, this LLC is going to protect me here. So the injured party sues the LLC, but they don't sue me personally because it's shielding myself from the claims brought against the limited liability company. Now, here's where investors typically make a mistake, right? They assume that that protection extends to everything they personally do as an owner. And the fact of the matter, it does not. And understanding where that protection ends is important to protecting your assets. So here's the blind spot. And it's the same one that I used to always remind my father of, and it's what got Mark into problems. You see, when you go out to work on your properties, so if you're self-managing your assets and you're out there, you're working on the properties, and let's say in that case you were working on this deck railing. Now, when you take that work on yourself, if you don't do it right and somebody's injured, then you can be sued for being negligent, right? So anybody that takes on an activity like this, let's say you hire a contractor to come out and fix the deck and they don't attach the deck, which actually happened to one of our clients probably 15 years ago, and the deck fell off the house and there's a big party and there's probably about 9 people on it that were injured. That contractor would be liable because they did not properly attach the deck to the house. So whenever you go out and you fix a railing in this example here, okay, or you do anything to your property, if your work results in the injury, then you can be sued personally, all right? So even though you have a limited liability company here, it's not going to protect you from your personal negligence. So this is the mistake that business owners make. Take it out of the real estate context as well. Let's say this was a business, right? So now you have your S corporation business set up, and you buy a vehicle. Let's buy a truck in the name of my business here, and it's got my logo on the truck right here, and I'm out driving the truck around. And let's say you're driving down the street and you've got one of these people right here, right? You probably not run into them, but you've seen them many times. You got a bicyclist. And I see this all the time. They're riding not on the edge of the road, which would be convenient so you could pass them. They kind of ride a third of the way out into the lane. And it's a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, and they're going 10 miles an hour. And so you got to get around them, or you hope to get around them. They don't care. They're delaying you. And so as you're moving around them, they kind of drift into your way towards you. You clip them. Now, who are they going to sue? Well, they're going to sue your business because your business name is on the truck and you're out there conducting business. But they're also going to sue you individually. So even though you're down here, you've set up a LLC, taxes and S Corp, and your vehicle's in the name of the corporation, you're still going to be held liable because you were the operator of that vehicle. Now, of course, you want to make sure that you have insurance and all that, but it still doesn't protect you. And so that's the problem we have here. And it also goes like with LLCs, how do you bypass liability? Let's assume that in this business, and this I was working with a client just the other day, they're entering into an agreement where this person here is agreeing to loan the business $275,000. But in addition to the loan against the business, they want a personal guarantee by the owner. Now, you've just opened yourself up to liability when you provide that personal guarantee. Because if the business defaults on this debt, then this individual here can come after you personally, because that's why they ask for the personal guarantee. So that puts at risk your personal residence, your checking account, your savings account, any assets that are in your name, then those become potentially attachable by the lender. Now, I'm telling you this because I've seen it many times in my career where somebody does not understand that even though the business is the one taking out the loan, that if there's a personal guarantee that is signed, and many times there is, you're still going to be personally liable. So loans are a big one as well. Another issue you run into with limited liability companies when you're setting or your business when you're setting it up is going to be that piercing the veil. So I was recently speaking on an event, and we were talking about real estate investing. And I said, all right, so you're a rental real estate investor, and you set up your structure like this, and you've probably seen this many times. I've drawn this out. Okay, I could do this with my eyes closed right now. And you have your holding company right down here. It's in Wyoming, and you're the member of the holding company. All these LLCs flow down to that. So the point of the discussion, when we were drawing this out on this event, I was talking about banking, right? Where do you create bank accounts? And the individual that was questioning me about these types of structures says, hey, where do people get this wrong many times? I said, well, what a lot of people I've seen in the past who create structures is they do not run the money properly. And what do I mean by that? Let's assume that the tenant up here at this LLC right here was going to pay rent of $3,000 this month. Well, you need $3,000, so you tell your tenant, hey, just pay me directly. Okay, so you're bypassing the limited liability company altogether. Or you have the money paid directly to the holding company, all right, and not to the actual property owning LLC. And then you never have any books or records to account for this income because for you just take the money right down here and you keep it down here and then you pay it out to yourself and you don't keep separate books for the limited liability company to show that it has its own expenses, has its own income. That is a major problem, okay, with rental real estate investors. Or maybe they are collecting the money here in this LLC. And then they use those funds for CapEx over here on this LLC because a roof needs to be repaired, something like that. So each of those examples that I just provided for you give rise to a veil-piercing argument, meaning that if they sue the limited liability company, if you didn't run your business and treat it like a business, then you can't expect it to protect you in the event of a lawsuit. So that shield that you've created, Okay, the veil can be pierced in those situations. And so you have to be very careful how you put your structure together to make sure you're operating it properly. Now, a fourth one that I hesitated to bring up when I was thinking about this video, okay, is where you have individuals who have created a single member LLC in a non-safe state. And what do I mean by that? Well, there are certain states, and we're just going to talk about one of them right now, Florida. And in Florida, if you're involved in a personal lawsuit and somebody sues you personally, then that creditor, okay, can not only go after you and take any assets that are held in your personal name, those all become attachable, but they can also take your ownership interest in this limited liability company. They can foreclose on it. Now, I said single member LLC. There are certain states that it doesn't matter if it's a single member or multi-member, but states where the LLCs do not offer charging order protections as the sole and exclusive remedy. That's why many times you'll find that I set up my structures with a Wyoming LLC as the member of all the upper tier companies because I want protection. I don't want to be in a situation where a client is now being sued and that LLC is crumbling down around them because a creditor through a personal lawsuit is able to pierce the company and take the assets, and now they're left with nothing. So that's another area where people can get into problems. So what does a real structure look like, right? What should Mark have done? Okay, so Mark's, number one, he shouldn't have been doing the work himself. And I've always told my dad that, hey, hire somebody to do it. He'll never listen to me because he often says, hey, that's what I have you for. That's why I sent you to law school. You're an attorney. You're there to protect me. Permanent retainer for life. But the fact of the matter is it comes down to this. And so I've had to take extra special care with my parents for this reason. So let's assume that you have your LLC set up. And number one, you don't want to run all properties inside of one limited liability company, what Mark was doing. That was a mistake. You have your holding company down here. So what I'm doing here is I'm solving for a lot of issues right now. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. So the issues that I'm solving for by creating this structure is that the holding LLC gives me what are called charging order protections. And so if you're not familiar with this, it means that if I get sued personally here, somebody comes after me, the attack's coming this way, then the LLC protects everything that it owns and they can't break it like I just shared with you earlier. So that's why I'm using that. The other thing about this type of structure here, the way I've set it up, I've put one property per LLC. So if something goes wrong with one of the limited liability companies, only that one property in that LLC is at risk. Now, ideally, you should have a bank account set up for each of these companies here. And when you set up that bank account, each LLC will collect its own rental income and pay its own expenses. That's important as well. Now, when it comes to moving money, so let's say this has $5,000 sitting in its bank account, and I want to book a cruise, okay, right here on the ship, and they need a deposit of $5K. Well, I will take the money, I'll distribute it to the Wyoming LLC because it's the owner, and then I'll take it out personally, and then I'll pay the cruise ship line. So I'm never going to pay money from this LLC to the cruise ship line, nor from this LLC to the cruise ship line. The reason being is because that is a personal expense. All right, so that's the thing. We want to make sure we're running the money properly. Now, the other important aspect of doing this, because things just come up, and if you're a hands-on landlord and you do happen to go out and fix something on the house, and that leads to somebody being injured, as I shared with you earlier, let's say it happened right here with this limited liability company. That's where you did the work and you made a mistake. They sue this LLC. This asset here is at risk. They also, meaning the injured party, will sue you personally. Now, here's where the structuring gets really important. So when they come after you personally, what is at risk here? Can they take your blue box? The answer to that is no. They cannot take your blue box for the reason I just described right here. So your other assets then can be exposed. And when I say those other assets, what am I referring to? Well, your personal residence, let's just say your home. Okay, if you have a savings account, that would be at risk. If you have a trading or investment account in your own name, gold, silver, things like that, crypto, okay, all of those will be at risk. So any assets that are in your name, titled in your personal name, are going to be at risk for that type of lawsuit. So what do we want to do then? We want to make sure that we're taking and we're putting our personal assets, those assets that have an investment feature to them, like our savings, not our personal checking, but our savings and our trading and our crypto and our gold and things like that, private notes, and protecting them, getting them out of our name. We do not want to keep them in our name, because if this structure fails at any point here, and that can always happen for people who are running active businesses, you're at a much higher risk of being named personally in a lawsuit. If you manage your properties personally, you're at a much higher risk of being named personally in a lawsuit. So we do not want our personal assets, those assets that we call investable assets that we can create a business purpose around, in our own name, because they can be subject to attachment. So we'll typically take these assets here, put them in a Wyoming LLC. We'll take the home right here and put that into a residence trust. All right, things like that. What would you not put into an entity? Okay, you never want to put this into some type of asset protection entity. Your checking account, how you pay for your bills, that stays in your personal name. Your vehicles that you drive around, right? They're going to stay in your personal name. You can't make your life so that you're completely judgment proof. If you try to do that, then you're going to blow all this up for other reasons, because would show, or the argument would be that you just set up structures for asset protection reasons and there was no business purpose behind it. You might be wondering, well, Clint, what's the business here for your savings account? Hey guys, savings pays interest. That is an investment account. It may not be as high. Well, actually, it's pretty high right now, considerably when you look back over the last 10, 15 years. But the fact of the matter is it's still an investment account, which allows it to be placed into an LLC. So even if you did this, though, keep in mind, everything that I just taught you, you can still screw this one up as well. Because if I have my savings inside of this account right here, and I need money to pay for that cruise that I was talking about, so I'm not taking it from my rental income. Instead, I'm taking it from my savings account. You would never want to pay for that cruise directly out of this LLC. You do that, that is a huge problem for you. All right, so this Wyoming LLC that we set up here would give you a distribution, and then you pay for the cruise personally. All right, it's all about understanding there are layers to our planning. Okay, and each layer that we create performs a different job when it comes to asset protection. All right, so this is one of the things that if you're sitting there right now, you've been watching me wondering, all right, hey, how do I structure myself to make sure that this doesn't happen to me? And what does it take? Does it take a Wyoming LLC? Does it take a land trust, a residence trust? Okay, how do these all come together? I got some great news for you. If you'd like, what I'm willing to offer each and every one of you is a strategy session with someone here at Anderson. And what we'll do, it's a free 45-minute strategy session. All you have to do is go into the show notes below for this video. There is a link in there. Click on that link and you can schedule yourself for this free strategy session, and we'll break it down for you. We'll show you where the weak points are in your structure and what you can do to strengthen that, to make sure that if you're a Mark, that all of your assets are not at risk. You see, Mark, in his situation, had he had some of this structuring that I just shared with you, he wouldn't have lost everything. All right? So putting this in place before the harm occurs is essential, because after you've been notified or after you're under a reasonable degree of certainty of a lawsuit, then there's nothing we can do for you. That's why being proactive to maintain your assets is key. We call it being a good steward of our wealth. Guys, if you want to learn more, click on that link inside of the show notes, set up that free strategy session. I wish you the very best with running your business and protecting your assets. Take care.